Good morning. Sorry we're all late. This is a presentation aiming at the 4D developers. So I'm not going to tell you about Wakanda. It's rather the connection between 4D and Wakanda and how we can use 4D with Wakanda easily. Just warning you for people that might be expecting only things about Wakanda. With next 4D version, in the driver will have the same model of data management as Wakanda. Wakanda server on its side is going to be able to use this connection, REST JSON, to get all the catalog of the 4D masks and be able to work on it. So this is a small 4D base in which I have books, authors, and a relation between the two. For those of you who know 4D, since version 11, we've been able to give a name to the relations, something that wasn't very useful up until now. So between the books and the authors, I wrote a relation that I called, being very original, I called it author. And the return relation towards Anne, well, each author has had several books, so I called it books. I'll start Wakanda now. I have a Wakanda application here, the classical preferred application for Thibault, employee in company. So I'm not going to start the server right away. Okay, we're going to hide this. Here I have a small structure, simple one, that has nothing to do with my 4D base. Here I go to the model, and in Wakanda I can develop the model with external catalogs. So this is a simple procedure. I like to add an external catalog. I give it a local name. This is my local reference. And the address of the web server, the 4D web server, which is also the Rust server. I opened it in the port 8040, and if I had done it in 4D, I could choose to have a username and a password to control the connection. I can also open the connection in HTTPS rather than HTTP in order to avoid data to transit via the local network. Okay, I'll come back here. If you look at there, the model only has employees, company. If I, well, here, the local model only has employee and company. But if I save it, I am in the usable model, having the authors, the books, and the other 40 tables that can be directly used. So everything is planned for a larger screen, so it's a bit difficult here. So I'm going to create a new page that I'm going to call Demo Conference. I'm going to put a grid and a shape, a form, a grid in which I'm going to have the books appearing. I'm going to ask for only seeing part of the data. So that's good. And I'm going to add a form . I'm going to extend it, to enlarge it. And in this, I'm going to have the same source of data. And here, I'd like to have more information again. I don't need this, but I could have maybe rather the image. Good. I'll just content myself with this so far. So I'll start this page again. The Wakanday server is going to start. The first time it wasn't started yet. It's coming slowly, but it's coming. So I have the 4D data that can be directly used in the form generated with Wakanday. If there are images, I can unfold them. So the binary data can also transit, or the 4D data can be handled directly. If I change something, if I can see that the text has been modified. So the modification is done both ways. I can use all Wakanday's possibility to handle the data. So it enables me to use the object language in Wakanday. I'll show you examples, more developed examples here. So here, I don't know if it's readable. TS represents the data store, that is all the data classes. So I can work on the books and do a query to get the books. Which idea or which title contains the keyword treasure. I'm going to do a query on the ID just to make sure that it's going to work. All right. I had to put just one percentage sign, and it's 2 in Wakanday. So I have my query, and the data are accessible. The query is not very interesting here, but I can go even further. I can look for all the books. What data do I have here? I have authors. I have Agatha Christie, for example. So I can do a query for the books, which author. Here, I don't know if you remember that I gave a name to my link, author, which in the 4D base uses the foreign key that is here to make the link. This link is called author, and here I can use it to carry out a request on this entity. I want to get all the books which author is Agatha, for example. So it carries out the query and it gets all the Agatha Christie books. So I can do quite complex queries by using the 4D language in Quadgy. So if I want to add a new book, here I'll add a book which title is simply this. So this is finished. If I go there and I ask to see my books again, I have some difficulties with this keyboard. So here I have my book here. So I can also try to modify it. In 4D, the file is locked because we're in a lock system that is quite pessimistic, and if I am on there, it's locked. If I go to Wakanday and I try to get this book, my book, there are a lot of ways to do it. Here I know that it's been created with ID 20. That's a primary key. So I cannot have access to it like this. For prod, we're going to display it to see what it contains. Now, if I try to modify something here, for example, the summary, and I try to save it, well, in that case, I have a mistake since the entity, well, the file is locked by 4D. If I try again by unblocking 4D, so here I free the file. I try again here. Here it works. And if I look in 4D, the data has been updated. So you really have the possibility to manipulate the 4D base in the way you want, with Wakanday possibilities, of course. Another example of interesting code, if I want to get for each author all the books, I can do DS. I mean, if I want all the authors, the set of authors, I want to have an array. What I'm interested in is to have the name of the author and to get the books. But in the books, I only want the title. So once again, I use what I have to unscroll the links and to have the relationship or the relation automatically. If I do that, it generates a mistake. It says that the class name does not exist. So I'll go to see how I called it. Actually, I wanted to show you that the mistake management is actually reported in 4D and Wakanda, and therefore I have an array that is a graphical one here, and a table of objects that contains one of the object properties, which is an array of objects that contains the titles of the corresponding books. And here again, with the authors, I can do queries to get what I want. So I have possibilities that are rather interesting. I said that I would only show the 4D Wakanda relationship, but if the site is online, I'll try to show you about the connection Wakanda, that function that works exactly the same way. So this is the last mistake. First of all, I'll try to check it was quite erratic this morning. Here I'm connected. I'll try to cut off the Wi-Fi connection. So I go to this model here, and here I'll add a second external catalog. So I keep the connection in my 4D base, which is a local one, and here I'll have a second catalog where I connect to conf.4d4.com. If I do that in the model, I only have my local model, then this is a pre-version of the fourth version of Wakanda. But in the final version, we'll have the possibility to see in a graphic way the external models. So if I save the model here, not only I have the classes that come from the local base and the 4D base, but I also have all the public classes of the Wakanda server. And on it, I can carry out some queries. For example, we can look at what is inside. It's quite improvised, so we'll see what happens. If we had done things properly, these things here This table should not be visible, should not be accessible without a password. But here I can do ds.session to see how many are in there. So I really don't know what is in there. Here I'm working on my server, which is a remote server. It is in the States. It is hosted by 4D in the States, and here I have all the data. Here we just have the name of the session with the name of the event. And rather than doing it on all, I'll be looking for all the ones which ID is below 20, just to limit the numbers. So once again, I can handle the data, whether they are local data or coming from another Wakanday server, here I could have a form in order to see this data. I can generate a page here, for example. Here we'll put the sessions. If I execute this, I should have all the sessions. There's some latency sometimes, and I can handle the remote data. You can see that there's some latency with this server. We'll have to see why. So this is the automatic magical dimension of it. As you can see, there are quite a few things to be taken into account if you want to do things properly. Since the 4D connections, the 4D customers server connections, well, a lot of you know that you have to be careful not to generate too many small queries, because you can easily have thousands of queries on the network if you do not remember about grouping the information. The Wakanday server that is connected to 4D, if I am on the same machine, that's not a problem. I can do whatever I want, and I can manipulate or handle the data one per one. If I'm on a server that is on a local network that's a bit distant, I'll be better off changing the code. But you have everything you need in Wakanday. You have object arrays. Rather than working with the entities directly, you can have an object that is a mimic of the entity. You can modify what you want inside, and modified the whole array in just one time. The code is almost the same. You don't have much difference. And you can group all the queries in one bigger query instead of having thousands of small queries. Same thing for retrieving data. Rather than going through the entity one per one, it would be better to use functions for handling tables, for example. Wakanday server works with collections and optimizes the collections work. So you don't really realize it in a lot of cases. In Wakanday server, there is a for each function that applies to a collection as you would do it on a JavaScript array. So you give a function as a parameter that is going to be executed for each element. If you use that in a collection of data coming from 4D, this function is optimized to group the queries and to get them packets by packets, 60 of them, 80 of them, which means that you don't have too many small queries. So there's a whole series of basic optimization in Wakanday server in order to avoid too much things to be done. But working with a large quantity of data, you should better have arrays when it's possible. Then all the functionalities of 4Ds are directly usable. Even for a remote server, with a remote server, you can handle each entity separately. You can activate any of the relation in a dynamic way. In Wakanday, if you have employee, company, and something else, it's when I use one of the attributes in the relation that the relation is activated. If I do that on a local network or even on the internet, I have my employee entity that's going to be loaded. If I use the relations, it's going to send another query to be activated. Sometimes, you don't need the relation, but sometimes also you want to be able to retrieve the employee plus the company in one query. So in Wakanday server, when you have a remote, it's possible to do it. You can say, I want to get this quantity plus this attribute, this attribute, this attribute, which are relation attributes in one query in order to avoid. I'm not going to dwell on all the possibilities, but out of principle, the connection works properly. It's magical, but not completely magical. You have to be aware that the developer has to carry out some analysis in order to avoid doing things in a non-optimized way. If we were in a purely local base, it's going to work, but not in the most optimal way. So I have 10 minutes left, so I'll switch to the last part. Just to show you what you can do in the interface between Wakanday and 4D, you saw the mobile part. But here I have all the possibilities. Here I'll do something interesting with my data. I just need to go back to 4D to look what I have. So here I'll do something else. Maybe I'll go to the IDs. I'll put a small slider somewhere. I'll just close that because we're lacking room here. I'd like to be able to carry out a query that would be a bit fun. This one here, I'll put something that I will call limit as a data source. And I want to go from 1 to 20. So since I say I have a limit source, it created a source on a local variable. I want it to be a number, and from this source, I'm going to put an event so that each time it is modified. Well, it's not working with this version here. Well, it's, spoils my demo here because this version is not working. Sometimes you have to close the page and open it again. It works that way. I don't have it on this version, sorry. I don't know if you have worked on GeoDesigner. You can come to see me after the session, please. Never mind, I'll do something else. It's just to show you that. Okay, anyway, I'll just go on the change here, and I'll take the value of the slider. So it would be var new limit. I believe this is the way I called it. Made a mistake again with the keyboard. I, wanted to look young and not put my glasses on, but I'm, making a lot of mistakes with the keyboard because I can't see what I'm typing. So sources, I said I wanted to do it with the books. I'll put ID here, below, or above rather. So this is a very simple query. Just want to make sure that this slider here is called slider 1. Yes, good. So if I load the page again, and I modify it, the query will then be based on what I'm modifying. It's a very simple example, but I really use Wakanday and its web development possibilities to have a web customer on my 4D base with Wakanday's possibilities. Do you have questions? Because I had planned to have 5 minutes for Q&A.
Ah, il y en a une ici.
Morning. If we add different database from the same structure, well, different servers open it with the same structure but different data. How could I see the names of the data? Will be similar or change the...
Alors la question, c'est s'il y a plusieurs serveurs connectés qui ont...
There are several servers connected. There are one or two different arrays with the same name. What happens? Now, in this version, the answer is no. There is one. The first one will be actually taken up, and the others will not appear. It is planned to be able to define in the catalog a hierarchy of classes. We can choose, in fact, a local name for example, the catalog, for the external catalog, I mean, and this can serve as the namespace. If I have server 1, server 2, I could have server 1 dot this array, and then server 2 this array. So there's no problem and to manage it this way.
Just a moment ago, you were doing on the slider, the limiting of the slider. Are you, every time that changes, re-accessing the original source, or are you modifying a local array of objects?
Non. Donc la question, c'est sur le slider.
On the slider, each time that I'll be moving here, is it working on a local array to do the query at the local or on the original source? Is that where the access takes place? Each time it's the query is done on the server. We can see it here. We can try and put it on the network. So I change, and here you can see the query. We're going to enlarge, and so you can see this better. So you see the query is someplace here. So I have the ID and the parameters, as you can see, that have been passed. So each time we do it through the server, so we do it on the server. Hello, Laurent. Now, in your example, when you have this locked file, how do you retrieve the errors? In Wakanday, in programming, okay. When we want to retrieve the errors in JavaScript, what we do is we have a try, and we execute the block part. For example, it will be just the save. We do a catch, and then in the catch, we receive an object. This object will, in fact, be the error sent, which would contain a number, a description of the module that it generated it, and a text explaining it. And this can also have an array that can have different chains of errors, sequences of errors. If I try to save an entity that's not working, maybe it's because the primary key has been duplicated. So I have first error, and then I have a duplicated key, which will be emerged, so the entity cannot be saved. So we can, like this, we can have an error list of errors in this way. And now on the 4D server, we have the same error, the same number. No, in the 4D server, no, I mean the Wakanday, says the person asking the question, will have the same reaction, the same number of errors. Now the number of errors for the block to come from cat 4D. Thank you. Maybe there's a last question, the very last question. Otherwise, you won't have time for a coffee break. Hello. So if I understand, at the level of error management, we're going to be catching the 4D errors in terms of coding. We won't have the JavaScript classical errors, for example, for the stacking, JavaScript stacking. In general terms, there is not one JavaScript classical error that exists because it's an object that we receive. So what I do is I send an object that contains the properties that are proper to, that are owned by Wakanday, and from 4D errors. In addition, you have properties that have been added that are from 4D. So we conserve the same logic with Wakanda that's unified in all of the Wakanda. So each air, in fact, has a property, air property, which has a number. The module, the number of errors, and you have an array of the different errors that will serve to create this error, if it comes from other errors, in fact. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Laurent.